Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming back to the hard stack. Welcome back, Eamon O'Malley. Hey, good to see you, man.
Yeah, good to see you. Thanks for having me and excited to
Of
talk about
course, always, always. Wanted to say a couple of things up front. This is not financial advice we're going to be providing today. And I do own some of the stock shares of one of the companies we're going to be discussing today. So I just want to be transparent with that. But first, I want to say thanks to our new sponsor, Hot Paper Lantern. They are an integrated agency that helps brands build and protect their reputation and generate growth. They tailor your ad campaigns to make the most impact, whether it be your focus on the growing data center, energy world, B2B companies overall, or our work in the sports and technology sector. Our deep expertise allow us to drive results for our clients. Find them at hotpaperlantern.com or on LinkedIn under Hot Paper Lantern.
Awesome. So yeah, I guess we'll get right into it. Um, so as a utility, Dominion owns one of America's most valuable power territories in the data center hub, Northern Virginia. And this is not just because it covers the four states and the greatest number of current data centers in the US, but also because it meets that demand and has become so capital intensive
Right.
that it may take um, the largest utility company in America to finance that future. It is also building the largest commercial offshore wind farm in the US, which we'll talk about a little bit more.
Yeah, and many of the earnings call questions that I participated on last week were regarding the major offshore wind project that's underway. So we'll kind of begin there. The project, when completed, would have 176 turbines producing about 2.6 gigawatts of electricity. And Dominion, which the symbol is D, just D, says that's enough to approximately power approximately 660,000 homes. It's located roughly 20 miles off Virginia Beach out in the ocean. Um,
Yeah. So Phil, yeah, tell us more about this big wind project.
it's actually called CVOW, is what they're calling it. And it stands for Coastal Virginia Offshore Wind Project. So you'll hear us say CVOW occasionally throughout the podcast. It's 81% structurally complete, but obviously there's a long ways to go. It's a big process. Only 31 of the turbines are currently installed at this time, as of the July 30th earnings call, with number 32 underway. Uh, they calculate that 81% includes the cables, the substations, the foundations, the equipment manufacturing, other constructions already completed. So more than 450 megawatts are already reaching the grid, which is pretty impressive. Um, I'd ask you, is it producing electricity much?
And yes, power is currently flowing. It's the project is no longer just like a construction promise, which is really great. But the installed turbines are already supplying electricity. And however, like the project won't reach its full 2.6 gigawatt capacity until the rest of the turbines and the transmission work are completed. That like separation really matters because the vending can begin receiving those benefits before like the farm is completed entirely.
Yeah, I've never heard
Um,
of a project that allows for uh, wind turbine, solar. It's very rare to have something that's already providing electricity or power of any kind halfway through the project. That's kind of cool that they don't have to just flick a switch at the end and say, okay, we're live. It's also
right,
smart because then they can kind of get a feeling for, hey, what's working, what's not working.
right, and especially going on an existing project, you're able to kind of like revamp and improve the technology for a lot of those things that are already there and operating. So,
Exactly. Especially,
um,
I think they call it posting up the turbines is one of the most difficult parts. So
okay, yeah. So, yeah, how long has or was construction stopped?
yeah, yeah, it was stopped for a while. Trump was just not in favor of this project, as a lot of people
Yeah.
saw in the media. So it was stopped for 25 days, and that's very costly. It came out to, it doesn't sound devastating, but it was $125 million cost, which is $5 million a day. I mean, and they lose several weeks that could have rippled through the entire installation schedule. So I'd ask you, why do you think Washington intervened?
I guess because mostly because of national security concerns. Um, because of all the clean energy issues, the administration said that the offshore turbines could potentially create interference with radar, and also any other vulnerabilities with national security. Dominion argued against that pretty strongly, saying that the project had been coordinated with the military for years, and that two of the pilot turbines had already operated without any national security problems so far. But of course, Trump clearly disapproves of the wind projects, and citing the visual aspects of it, but also
You
um,
also mentioned birds, get killed,
right,
which
all of the
yeah, I
above.
get
Yeah,
it. I get it. But, we're trying to, we're in the fourth industrial revolution. We need power. So,
right,
and this
exactly.
is, we're not exactly throwing up solar farms throughout the desert Southwest, for example, where nobody lives. So if you're not going to do that, and we'll get more into some of the reasoning behind why there and why this company in a minute. Okay.
Right.
You know,
Yeah, because yeah.
yeah, the schedule lost flexibility. That's the bottom line. They didn't blame the entire revised schedule on Washington, but the reality is it was an issue based on a lot of that. It reduced the project's margins too, which caused further problems. So, do you see when it's planned to be finished?
Yeah, as of right now, reports are saying that the final turbine will be installed in late 2027, which is coming up pretty quickly, even though it's still over a year away. And Dominion expects that approximately 6 months past its previous target, that everything will be completed, even though portions of the project will already continue start start operating before then, so that customers won't have to wait until all the turbines, 176 total, will have to be completed before they start receiving electricity.
Expensive project too. 11.65
Right,
billion. That's no chump change. It's roughly only 2% above the original prior estimates, which is, I think, pretty spot on.
right,
Um, so they are working with their project financing partner, Stone Peak, who I'm not familiar with, but that's a lot of where the financing is coming from. And they management says the change should only minimally affect customers' bills and the project's overall electricity cost, because in the long run, they intend to provide a lot of that back to their end users in front of the meter. So that's great.
right.
Um, so hardly finished, but go ahead.
Yeah, and I guess also, do you think that the project is de-risked at this point?
Um, you know, Virginia definitely needs power. So that's the reality of this whole situation. Northern Virginia data centers, uh, Texas will catch up eventually in the number of data centers that they are going to have. So if we're looking at this 5, 10 years in the future, Texas will probably, and even possibly Louisiana might surpass Virginia. But the reality is Virginia is the data center capital of the country. So they got to bring that on online. That wind requires no purchase fuel,
Right.
right? So management now estimates approximately 5 billion in customer fuel savings during the next 10 years, which
Wow.
is
Okay.
sizable, right?
That's
So
amazing. Yeah.
yeah. Um, so do you think wind guarantees the reliability of it all?
Um, let's see. Sorry, I have to.
That's all right.
Um,
I mean,
it does.
the reality is it varies with weather, right? I mean, it's probably
Yeah. It does it adds a lot of capacity, but obviously wind is a big variable. You can't always depend on it like you can with natural gas. And Dominion will probably still require or depend on nuclear, gas, storage, and other resources to provide that kind of stable power. Um, but wind is obviously another. It's good to have it if you can, just to have the reliability spread out and more dispersed. So
The reality is that there with all these companies like GE Vernova as a great example, right? Or even
yeah,
uh, Rolls Royce, which we talked about in a previous podcast, they're all now backlogged, right? I mean,
right,
5 years easy.
right,
So you have to have some kind of in order to get your turbines to be provided sooner than that somehow, because that's the backlog.
right,
So if you're building a data center, you need that power. You can't wait. So this is a great way to continue to provide that with all that's being built out in Virginia. Um, and it's just a smart move altogether. So any
right.
other thoughts on that before we switch gears?
Yeah, I guess Trump's main thing was when he initially took away the tax credits for wind was the FIOC, the Foreign Entities of Concern, which basically targeted China for a lot of the materials that they get for wind and solar. So that seemed to be the big issue up front, but um, as long as they're getting kind of reliable materials and infrastructure for that, then hopefully it should be.
Yeah, there's not many who I don't think there's any that I know of that manufacture the wind turbines here in America.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe some of our allies, but but when you look at solar, there are companies now building solar panels, for example, within
Absolutely. Yeah.
our allies and on American soil.
Right. Yeah.
So
So definitely. Yeah.
let's switch gear. So the next part of this that we wanted to get into is there's a company called Next Era Energy, and their symbol is NEE, and they are effectively acquiring Dominion Energy. That's who we've been talking about is Dominion. Um, it's we see it as the normal investor sees it as a takeover, but they're trying to be cute and say it's a combination because they want it to be fully approved and everything, and it should be. So it's an all stock transaction. I'm going to read some of the stats. Dominion shareholders will receive 0.813 Next Era shares for each Dominion share. After closing, current Next Era shareholders will own approximately 74.5% of the combined company, while Dominion shareholders will only own 25.5%. So that's interesting. The surviving public company will be named Next Era Energy, continuing under the trade name NEE, and be led by Next Era's CEO, John Ketchum, who's pretty good. Those terms clearly make this a Next Era the dominant party. This will connect offshore wind, AI data centers, transmission spending, and the Next Era Energy transaction into one coherent story, which is important right now, rather than two unrelated corporate updates. So I would say, and we covered it somewhat, but is this truly an acquisition or a merger for you?
Legally, it is, but practically, it's just an acquisition. Both of the boards approved a stock for stock combination, but NextEra Energy shareholders will own about three-quarters of the resulting company. The company will keep the NextEra name, same ticker, and the same CEO, John Ketchum. Dominion is not disappearing operationally, but control unmistakably goes back to Next Era.
Yeah, and
Um,
we'll go into more detail on what territory we're talking about here,
right.
physical territory. But when could the acquisition close?
It's looking like late 2027 right now. But the announcement is expected to close anywhere from 12 to 18 months of the original announcement on May 18th. And Nextera management said that it expects the transition to close around that time, just waiting on approval and regulators to approve it. Um, so yeah, I'll flick it back to you. What are shareholders expected to receive from this?
Next era stock plus cash is the definitive answer, but it's really interesting how they're going to do this. And there's a big number in here that they have not articulated how that's going to be uh, split up amongst the shareholders. So Dominion shareholders are scheduled to receive 0.8138 next era shares. We already said that. They will continue receiving Dominion's currently quarterly dividend until closing and will collectively receive a one-time $360 million cash payment at closing. So I don't know where that money's going to. Does that go into the budget of Dominion, which no longer really exists, or does that go to me
Right, right.
as a shareholder? Um, so to give you an idea, a couple of things that's kind of important to know is today, NextEra Energy trades around $86, $87 a share. Dominion's right around $69 a share. I think it fell a little bit today. What's also interesting is NextEra, they give a 2.2% dividend. And Dominion is closer to 4.
Right.
So there's a difference right now. But when you look at what the dividends, we're going to get into it later, but when you look at the dividend numbers, the actual pennies, it's
Right.
pretty similar. So,
Okay.
well, so does Dominion's name disappear?
It doesn't. It'll still be around in that Virginia area where it's mostly or very prominent. But the parent company will be NextEra Energy. Dominion Energy, Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina are expected to keep their kind of sub utility names. The combined company will remain in Florida and Virginia, with South Carolina as kind of an additional headquarters.
It's a
Um,
big presence here.
yeah, and kind of like the bigger question, we've hit on all these facts so far, but why does Next Era want Dominion?
Yeah, this is an interesting point. Power demand is changing everything. Very easy to see when you spend a lot of time studying energy, especially here in the South. So Dominion controls one of the most strategically valuable electricity territories, right? With Northern Virginia, the largest concentration of data centers in the country. So Dominion reported more than 53 gigawatts of data center capacity in previous contracting stages. That is phenomenal. I mean,
Yeah,
even just 1 gigawatt is considered a pretty gigantic at this point in time in history. That's considered a pretty, enormous data center,
yeah,
um,
absolutely.
including about 12 gigawatts already under electric service agreements. So NextEra is buying direct exposure to the AI electricity boom. Now, one other thing from my point of view, I'm not, I believe this is going to become a trend across America. I can't speak for Europe right now. I'm not close enough to that. But I think this has been a trend across utilities in America. Even though NextEra is not really considered a pure utility and Dominion kind of is, I could
Right.
see more of the Constellation Energies of the world
Absolutely.
swallowing up a smaller utility or a utility in order to get the same benefits
Right.
that these two are going to see. So with that said, it's just something to be cognizant of. Would you think Dominion agrees with this?
I do. I know, without going too much into the financials, the Dominion has a ton of debt trying to structure these large capital investments right
That is
now.
true.
Um, and that helps them a little bit, just clearing it out. And um, I know from the ratepayers' perspective, electricity is the most expensive in this region because of the high capacity costs on the commodity side.
Right.
but also on the regulated side as well. And uh, yeah, the scale definitely helps because you're lowering a lot of the capital pressure. It might improve your credit a little bit as a larger, well-known utility. Um, and also for just rebuilding infrastructure, it's so difficult to get the headcount just to have the crews to rebuild so much of the transmission lines or um, the pipelines, but also building the wind and nuclear as well. So it's very complex. I definitely understand the disagreement from the ratepayers side because um, it likely will definitely mean additional cost increases just because that's how the trend is going. But Dominion also gains access to um, a lot more financial capabilities with all their additional capital costs. Um, and then, yeah, so really, you mentioned Constellation, but another one is how big will Next Era become with all of these kind of mergers it's entering into just recently?
Yeah. It's going to be a giant. It's going to be a utility giant. There's no doubt about it. One thing I would also say back to your previous answer is, I can't speak for Florida or really even Virginia, but in the Carolinas, at least South Carolina, it is a stark contrast for me as to what I pay every month in electricity bills versus the West Coast
Absolutely,
and
yeah.
probably Boston, where you're at, and probably New York and Philadelphia as well.
Right.
We were shocked that, I think my brother had a great quote. He said, "We haven't seen your monthly utility pricing since 1985."
Right. Wow.
So we're very fortunate in a lot of ways that we can not be too concerned about, where we set the thermostat at, for example,
Right. That's a big one. The
because
basic necessities.
it's really pennies on the dollar compared to other places such as California or even Arizona. Um, so yeah, it's 10 million utility accounts. That's how many accounts they'll have on hand, which is going to be 110 gigawatts of generation. That's amazing for two companies combined. 80% of its business will be regulated. That's no surprise. And it's concentrated, as we said, in Florida, Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. What do you show is happening to the dividends?
Dominion's dividend changes with consolidation. So their shareholders will continue receiving Dominion's existing quarterly dividend at 66 cents per share until the transaction closes. And then afterwards, they will participate in NextEra's dividend policy, currently at 62 cents per share. And NextEra currently targets approximately 6% annual dividend growth through 2028, with the number of shares owned changing just because of the kind of 81% exchange ratio. Um, what do end user customers receive on that end?
Well, I mean, bill credits and a lot of promises, because there's just not. It's difficult to estimate exactly how much this is going to hurt or benefit um, the regular residential end user. We're not there
Absolutely.
yet. They're proposing a $2.25 billion shareholder funded bill credits over the next 2 years after the deal's closed, right? Which is probably late
Right.
2027. So we're really talking 28, 29, for all the Dominion customers in Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. Longer term savings depend on how they execute, between
Right.
promised financing, procurements, operating efficiencies. The immediate credits are tangible. Unfortunately, the long term credits are not. They're
Right.
just still must be proven in the
And I
long.
checked. actually, that 2.25 billion will translate into around $10 per month per account. So it seems like a big amount, but really you're not actually getting
Well,
so much of a
except in our
reduction.
world, it amounts to about 8%
Right, yeah.
because of how little we're
So yeah,
paying.
absolutely.
I mean, it wouldn't mean anything to you in Boston, but it
Right.
might mean something to somebody in, the Grand Strand of South Carolina.
Definitely, yeah.
Is there anything that can block the approval from going forward?
Just how it's controlled by the regulators. The transaction requires approval from the shareholders, the Federal Antitrust Clearance, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission or FERC, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission or NRC, and then reviews by states in Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. So a long list of approvers.
True.
Um, and they'll focus primarily on the customer rates, general market power, local control in the states themselves, and whether the promised savings are actually enforceable. And many of these hurdles have been surveyed already and have shown decent favorability.
Yeah, and one of the
Um,
things I'm wondering about that is when did you survey them?
exactly.
And are you going to continue to survey them throughout the early part of 2027?
Right.
Because, we've seen opinions change quite dramatically with don't put a data center in my backyard.
Right.
So I don't think that's happened so much in Virginia. I know it started to happen here in South Carolina a little bit. I don't know about North Carolina.
Right.
I would think that Raleigh and Durham, especially, have a very large, presence of data centers that are non-AI. Um, but it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Right. And even in Virginia as well, I was looking on some discussion forums, and the number of sponsors, corporate sponsors from Dominion in just the local, like Richmond area, is actually extremely large. Dominion is one of the only like large corporations in the area that gives to like, I guess, local organizations. So just the sponsorships and programs in that area has a really big impact beyond just the generation itself. So
Community involvement type stuff, you mean?
exactly, yeah. So just something to note. I don't know if that will change at all, but um, next era, if they kind of come in as this big monopoly and um, take away that local connection, could change some things for
Yeah, we'll
sure.
have to see if the promises outrun the actual. It's good to be politically
Right,
correct, right? That's good corporate um, promises, and good corporate benefit
right,
because you should take care of the people that are paying your salaries, right?
right.
Which is the
Exactly.
end users.
Yeah.
Next era is forecasting extremely good operating efficiencies and growth, but
Right.
utility mergers frequently face political conditions, cost overruns, regulatory issues. They may be forced to provide additional customer protections, like, for example, that $10 per month on the bill reduction.
Right.
That may be forced to go to $15 or even $20. And I
Right.
bet you they'd probably still say yes because they are in such a bad way needing this demand in
Right.
order to not, screw up that reputation that they have with the
Right.
corporate side of the world, right? So, who do you think really benefits the most?
I have to say I'm on the side of the ratepayers, so whatever whatever benefits the cost the most, I'm in support of right now. But obviously, you look towards the long-term generation that's going to be powering data centers in that area, and ultimately the technology in our country, which is kind of hard to grasp, but if everything goes to plan, it would be amazing. Having kind of a more centralized utility in the southeast coast there, and then yeah, Dominion gains access to Nextera's balance sheet.
It's important. That's more
Yeah,
important than most people think because Dominion's
absolutely.
balance sheet is pretty meager compared to the combined effort.
Right, yeah, and mentioning all the debt that they have, getting to maybe restructure a little bit. Nextera also, I used to work in commodity, and Nextera was buying large amounts of the natural gas books as well from other competitive retail suppliers. So it's just seeing that consolidation could mean a lot of growth, as you said. But we'll see how it benefits the customers. How do you think
I do
it
I
will
think
fare?
I I'm not certain, but I will say that I'm lukewarm on if this can succeed. Um,
Right,
the strongest conversation is not simply the one that whether CVOW, right, the coastal offshore wind project, and the
right,
merger are good or bad. I Dominion owns one of America's most powerful territories, honestly, and yet it's some of it's very meagerly populated, I should say.
right,
Because you have big hubs in places like Charlotte, in Raleigh and Durham and places like that. Here in South Carolina, I mean, this is only a $6 million, 6 million person population.
right.
There's,
Yeah,
there's cities that are that big in the West Coast.
right.
Boston's probably bigger than that by far. I would imagine. I don't know. Do you know the population of
I
Boston?
I don't, but I think it's a little bit bigger.
Yeah, or close to.
Yeah,
So, yeah, so you connect offshore wind, you connect the data centers, which aren't going away. 'Cause, I mean, they've slowed down a lot of the data. I was just reading something today that said that there's 1,500 in process and they've slowed 152 down to either
right.
no or delay. So that's 10%, right? So
Yeah,
which is still a lot.
yeah, absolutely.
And the majority of the people still believe that you've you can't allow China to get the upper hand on the data center link to AI. Hard to prove that now, especially with all that's coming out of China with respect to, Kimmy K3, Hugging Face, that what happened with that, and how they're able to easily overcome some of Anthropic and OpenAI's most recent attempts to upgrade their offerings. So
Mhm.
it'll be interesting to see how that turns out. Will this be a coherent story? I just don't know. But there was a third topic. I don't know if you did any research on it. I did not. But, the earnings call said that Dominion's extraordinary data center pipeline, because they have pipeline of more than 53 gigawatts being discussed or contracted, including roughly 12 gigawatts of signed electric service agreements already. I would imagine that majority of those, if not all of those, are behind the meter, not in front of the meter. It kind of depends, I suppose, on the size of the megawatt versus gigawatt that's being requested for those centers. Um, any other thoughts before we begin to close, or any other things you want to talk about?
Yeah, the behind the meter, as you mentioned, it's a big option now just because a lot of these data centers are able to have their own generation, and not be necessarily connected to the larger grid where ratepayers are subjected to that usage as well and that demand. So definitely exciting, but yeah, we'll definitely see how it evolves.
Well, we want to thank Eamon O'Malley again from being a big part of this um, project with the podcast at the Hard Stack from Stock Talk. We want to thank Hot Paper Lantern again for being the sponsor. And we hope everybody out there was able to get something out of this. And I would love it if you guys would comment, if you got this far into the podcast, as to where you'd like us to go next. Would you like us to, for example, do the Oklahoma territory or the Ohio Valley territory and what's going on there? Because there's a lot of stuff going into Indiana, Ohio. There's a lot of data center stuff going on up there. Would you like to see the impact on the residential corporate usage of the utilities from there, for example, or practically anywhere in the footprint of the United States? We'd be happy to research and provide that information back to you. So thank you very much. Have a great day.
Yeah.